for the insurance broker services related to our property, casualty, and executive risk policies. We issued an RFP. The rating was 70% qualifications, 30% pricing. We received 5 submissions. Myself and Tony Gabata, who is our controller, independently rated the proposals. Ultimately, at the end of the day, Starkweather and Shepley received the highest score of 95.5. It was very close. The next score was with Willis Towers Watson. They were 95.2. Starkweather and Shepley did have the lowest price out of all the proposals. They are one of our incumbents. Today we have 2 firms. We have Risk Strategies and Starkweather and Shepley. Risk Strategy just places the bridge property insurance, and Starkweather and Shepley places everything else. One of the main changes of this RFP was we were paying the brokers based on a commission. So as our premiums were going up, they were earning more money, which is not a very good strategy because they're not incentivized to, get us the best price. So when we issued this RFP, we did it on a fixed fee basis. Their price came in at $75,000. When you look at the commissions we've paid over this past year, it was about $110,000. So we will save that money. It's a contract for 3 years plus with an optional 2. So over that time period, we would effectively save about $200,000.
Jeff, how much are the directors covered up to?
We have a $2 million
Per?
Well, it's a policy. So it's an overall. You talking about
Umbrella?
Are you talking about our D&O policy?
Yeah.
For this? Yeah, we have a $2 million policy.
That's all?
Yes.
Well, maybe our legal counsel can help.
Yeah, we can also
in a lawsuit against the board and the members.
Is that part of his duty, though?
What level of liability do we have?
To say it's remote is to exaggerate it. I mean, under Rhode Island law, there isn't liability for the board members for the operations of the bridge. There isn't. The board members are shielded. My experience, when you said $2 million, I thought that's a lot of coverage, because I typically see D&O policies with $1 million in coverage, and I've handled those claims. $2 million is a lot of coverage, again, given.
Does it work differently for a quasi than it does, for example, for directors that are direct employees of the state?
No, the quasi still has an obligation to indemnify you. You're a quasi, which is always a little bit different than the state. But when I look at the coverage you have in place, and again, the fact that board members in Rhode Island, unless there's some embezzlement scheme with the board that I'm unaware of, like unless you're actively involved in something that's wrongful, there is a liability in Rhode Island.
No, I know that, for example, for directors and management of departments that are state employees are exempt really from personal liabilities as it relates to the job.
Yeah, so there's a state statute that essentially says if you sue people at that level, the state entity is substituted as a defendant. I don't think the quasis benefit from that,
okay.
But I'm familiar with liability for board members in connection with corporations, nonprofits, for-profits in Rhode Island, and the law just provides a high degree of protection, because if not, no one would take these roles on. Mm-hmm. And again, $2 million of coverage, in my experience, is a lot of coverage.
Interesting. Probably, I think it'd make everybody feel a bit more comfortable if we got kind of a legal finding,
Okay.
on what actually the exposure liability is for a quasi-public board member.
Perfect.
I will say from the many years ago, and Peter Gennaros may remember this, I remember this issue being raised by Richard Anarino when he was on the board here. And I recall that he, he wanted it looked into and wasn't, he eventually was comfortable remaining on the board. So I know that it was looked into then, but that's quite a few years ago, so it bears revisiting.
Okay.
I'll put it together, thank you.
Thank you.
If there's no more discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded.
Second.
Calling the vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
We can always go back and make quick
Opposed and abstentions. Okay, number 5. This is just an extension.
Sure. This is our on-call toll consulting services. We're nearing the end of our 3-year term. They offer us guidance in traffic and revenue studies, any kind of tolling RFP. So most recently that came before the board was their services for the back office RFP as well as the roadside RFP. So we are looking to extend for an additional year for the 6 companies.
Okay, those are just on call, so if you never call them, there's no cost?
No.
So it's a task order?
It's a yep, it'd be task order, and we do ask for at least 3 quotes per task order from the
Amongst
consultants that are
everyone.
on call.
Motion approved.
Motion to pass, second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions.
Just one, I'm sorry, just one question. Is this an annual extension that's allowed under the contract, right?
It's allowed under the contract. We have 2 additional 1-year options.
Okay,
So
great.
this is exercising the first one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So doing good. We're down to number 6, those locker bearings that I learned about for the first time in my life.
Sure. So to continue with the same item that I briefed you on in the last meeting, we've gone further with the analysis and design of this issue. Last time I spoke about potentially having to add on to the pier cap with Corbel. The consultant has come up with a way to shore the beams first in the shorter term with a bunch of steel, around the bearing. But it's now detailed in such a way that we can come in later with that shoring in place and use that shoring to jack the beam and then replace the bearing. So what I'm recommending here is that we proceed with the project not only to shore the beams for the shorter term, but then to go ahead and order the bearings through a contractor that bids on this, and then go ahead and just get the bearings replaced. It may take several months, maybe even 4 to 6 months to get the bearings in and replace them, but the shoring that will be put in place will ensure that there's no issues out there in the meantime. So what I've done is just for a matter of expediency, prepared this approval based on the design as it currently sits and the estimate that currently is in place, and asking for pre-approval for $150,000 plus a contingency of $20,000. So that we plan on going to bid on Friday as it stands right now. We're that far along in the plans and specs. But we're going to probably go to bid only for about a 2-week period because it's not complicated. There's not a lot of items in there. And then when the bids come in, we'd like to be ready to just kind of go ahead and authorize them to get moving on this so we get that shoring in place. Because the warmer it gets, the more that bearing can tip. So we'd like to get the shoring in place before the weather really starts to turn and get too warm. So what I'm recommending is that we get a pre-approval, and then I would update you, the board again next month with how the bids came in, and then obviously the project status, with the real numbers.
As I understand it, the bearing is not a replacement of the same type of bearing. It's the new modern bearings like we have on the other side.
It's a new disc bearing actually from DS Brown. So they've actually researched, found the exact bearing that and they've spoken with the bearing manufacturer. We're speccing a particular bearing that fits in there and can take the loads, the high loads that are coming off of the plate girders there. So.
No more questions. Peter made a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Make a motion.
Second made and second. Call for the vote. Did you have a question? No, just putting your glasses on. Sorry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Unanimously passed. Great. On to the capital improvement. Doing awesome. Get a status.
I'll make this pretty brief. We've got, we're really finishing up a lot of these items. I did add one new item in here. So I had an item for the AET conversion. I've broken it out into phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 AET conversion, which was the temporary setup out here, long-term temporary setup, is absolutely complete now. The steel barriers that have wheels on them and can move out of the way have been replaced and pinned in place now for the duration of that setup. So that whole item is complete. What I did was I broke out phase 2 so that we can start tracking. I'll remove phase 1 next board meeting, but phase 2 will start tracking the conceptual design. The conceptual design task order that we currently have in place takes us up until the so-called 30% design submission. And then we'll have a phase 3, which will be final design and construction. Phase 2 continues. The selection of lane integrator has kind of pushed us a couple months out, but once that lane integrator comes in, they'll be able to finalize that conceptual design and then make a submission on that. And then we'll make a selection on what the final configuration will be, and we'll negotiate a task order to complete the final design and construction phases at that time. Miscellaneous steel repairs for Mount Hope and Secana, 2 items on that one. So the original work on that contract is complete. But I mentioned the last time we had an interim report on Mount Hope that came in and identified a bunch of areas that needed some repairs. We have money in the contract. It's similar type work, so it fits the scope, the original scope of the project. So we're going ahead and preparing a plan of work that we can give to the contractor to submit a pricing proposal on. And then we're hopeful that we can do all of the work with the amount of money that's left in the budget, so that'll be good. All of those items that were identified in the report can just go away and be checked off next time as addressed and rectified. Guardrail painting is now complete. That'll drop off. Bridge inspections, last board meeting, you folks approved the new Pell underwater inspection, so we're going to proceed with that one, and then minor bridge inspections on the 138 bridges, so that one's proceeding as well. Load rating of Jamestown is now complete. I've got a meeting set up tomorrow to discuss the results with the consultant on that. And capital improvement plan update is still with the financial folks. We anticipate once that plan comes back and we're able to sort through funding and where we stand with any federal funding, that we'll be able to initiate some of the projects on that are coming up. And some of the big ones that obviously it's the Mount Hope dehumidification. But another big one that needs to start soon is the rehab of the deck on the suspended spans of Pell, which originally was planned for, I've been here a year and a half, it was 5 years out then, so it was probably another 3.5 years down the road. I'd like to get it started sooner based on the condition that I'm seeing out there. So we'll be able to sort through that when we get the financial plans back. That's all.
Any questions? We need a motion for this? It's just information.
Yep.
Thank you. So, financial call.
Hopefully, everyone did receive the financial statement notes that were sent out. So we did, I'll plan on doing that every single month. We'll get that out with a board package instead of a low-range report.
Excuse me, Jeff, if I could.
Yes, sir.
For me personally, that was very good. That read ahead that you sent,
Oh, great.
it was a nice narrative. It was easy to understand. Thank you. Worked out well.
You're welcome. So I think doing that will cut down on the amount of time I have to go through that here. But basically versus budget, total revenue is up 13%. Total revenue is up 18%. Gas tax 5%. In the meantime, our year-to-date operating expenses are lower by 14%. Again, I've laid out all the detail of where those variances are for the personnel expenses, all the way down to transponder expenses. So I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I'd be happy to answer them for you. I did include a couple of charts for you. Again, each month we're trying to do a little bit better by providing a little bit more information, some more analytics, some more visuals. Sometimes looking at the visuals is much easier than reading the actual commentary. Everything is going along well. We're filling our positions where they're needed. Maintenance is fully staffed. I know in Katie's area, the customer service representatives We've kind of, in the last 2 weeks probably, Katie's turned some of the part-time positions into full-time positions, and also we've been able to hire some full-time positions there as well. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer anything that you may have.
Just kind of a comment. When we look at the revenues, you know, the graphs are great because they tell a lot in very little words. So about 40% of our revenue right now is coming from gas tax. And I'm sure everybody's heard the rhetoric about, you know, limiting the gas tax and this, right? Well, that's probably not going to happen, but what is going to happen over the next 50 years or so, we don't know how soon, but the gas tax is going to evaporate, right? Because electric vehicles don't pay gas tax. So as more of them get on the road, that gas tax is going to become less and less available for us. So we're beginning to look at a replacement for that revenue stream, and would like to integrate in Turnpike Bridge to those discussions, because we've got to formulate probably legislation to begin a transition to another form of revenue collection to replace the gas tax, because that's for us it's even more exaggerated at DOT, because it's like 4 to 1. We get $4 of federal funding for every $1 of state funding, but here it's 40% of your budget. And right now, that tax revenue, when you consider we got about 3% of the vehicles in the state are already electric, we've already seen a 3% reduction in the revenue. Now, it's not enough for the various agencies not to absorb in some way, but over time, that's going to become, particularly as we provide incentives for people, as the governor announced a couple of days ago, to buy these vehicles. Every year, we're going to see a reduction. And the faster they buy them, the quicker that reduction is going to happen. So if we're not prepared to have that replaced in kind, over that time, we're going to not have the money that we need to operate and maintain our infrastructure. So we'll be putting together a kind of committee informally to begin to work on that, and we'll be in touch.
Is there a migration already towards mileage?
Mileage is one. I mean, there are some states that support 100% of their funding, without federal funding, 100% of their transportation costs through sales tax and income tax revenues. And it's religiously provided to transportation for transportation purposes. It's part of the budget, part of the state budget. We are more reliant on the federal government, with 80% of our funding coming from the federal government. Not so much you all, but so there are a number of different avenues, and part of what we'll be studying is what is the kind of economic impact, the legal impact, the technical impacts on various forms of revenue sources, and to determine, you know, at least a set that we can present to the legislature, probably in the first year of the first term of the next gubernatorial. So, you know, just be, if you could, just be thinking internally about some ideas that you all may have to begin to formulate where we go next.
If I could add that this issue, it comes up a lot because we belong to the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association. They devote whole seminars to this issue, and I believe there's one coming up in 2 months, I believe. So on the issue of alternative means of financing deterioration and maintenance of roads.
Yep. I'm sure we can, it's gonna help having that kind of information brought to, as part of the consideration. Particularly with the adjoining states, because we want to make sure we maintain parity economically with the other states in a collection of various forms of revenue. But my sense is that the ultimate solution to this is going to be uniquely Rhode Island, because we have a different. We're not Colorado, we're not California, right? We're Rhode Island, so. My sense is that ultimately the solution will be one that fits us best, considering our formula funding from the federal government, et cetera, et cetera. Just a heads up, you folks can start thinking in that direction.
Excellent food for thought. Roosevelt gasoline tax.
It's coming.
So we're down to the executive director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So as usual, I will just start with a quick look at our traffic. We always show you we're on track. Whenever we look at this, we're always looking at the disaster that is the gray line, the 2020, the COVID line. You can see that we bounced back in 21. Obviously, the blue line representing the first 2 months of this year. We're on track to be I certainly hope we'll be back. We ended at 21 virtually at where we were in 2019. I think we will see that blue line shoot up and track right along, if not above where we were in 2019. We saw a bit of a slow start because we had 2 storms, and we had a bit of an impact from the Omicron variant of the COVID virus. So we're on track. We're looking good with traffic. The federal funding requests, we're all feeling very, very upbeat about that. We had our debriefing with the USDOT on our RAISE grant. The next round of RAISE grant applications is due April 14th. We're confident that we got great feedback from the USDOT. The 3 categories that they looked at in the RAISE grant were merit, where we got the top score. Second was the magnitude of the project, which is local and regional impact, where we got just shy of the top score. And third was information content credibility, where we again got the top score. So the USDOT representative who met with us, who we're told is highly respected at the USDOT, Mr. Augustine, and he told us that we had just come within a hair of getting granted our Mount Hope Bridge dehumidification project grant the first time. The next round is due April 14th. We have some great ideas, we think, for leaving the good parts exactly as is. We were told, don't touch all of the stuff we liked, touch only the stuff that we had questions about. It's clear that we need to highlight more that the Mount Hope dehumidification project, and I'm just looking around for it, but I moved some of the pictures of it over there as well. Yeah, some of the pictures are there. But it's clear that it's very much related to climate change. We can highlight that. We're also working with unions. We're working with a group that focuses on the workforce of tomorrow, introducing children from kindergarten through college to the concept of infrastructure, and to the concept of maybe I could have a job in my adult life as an engineer, as a CFO, as a part of a maintenance crew, as someone with specialty in fixing rocker bearings or diving to do underwater inspections. All those things that, when you ask a child, what do you want to be when you grow up, they don't say, I want to be diving under the water to inspect a suspension bridge. So all those things are great ideas. We're working with all the entities that have said, we can help you to make this next submission even better than your first submission. And we're excited. We still have 3 ARPA proposals pending through the State Office of Management and Budget. We're waiting to see what eventually what the budget looks like. I think that Senator DePalma and Representative Solomon are pressing hard to get us the funding for the study that we already have ready to go. And the contractor to whom we awarded the project asks every couple of weeks, should we be ready to go? We are ready to go. When will we start? As soon as we have the funding is obviously the answer. And so we expect that. We expect to see some movement on that and to have some money to study the feasibility of some deterrent concepts for the bridges, for the suicide issue. As you know, we also have an ARPA request pending to fund what we've already done in terms of converting the plaza to all electronic tolling. And the other kind of exciting thing for us, as I mentioned, the IBTTA a few minutes ago, and at their technology summit, and Jeff will be attending this coming week. At their technology summit Monday, they have there will be a presentation, and I think it's called Zero to AET in 90 Days, and it's us. It's our plaza and our pilot program going in a hurry due to the fact that many collectors had needed to leave the workplace because COVID was a threat at the time, and we were down to 2 shifts of collectors, and we quickly did this pilot program to see if we could go all electronic. So they'll be presenting that at the International Bridge Tunnel and Turnpike Association Technology Summit on Monday. So that's exciting too. We're looking at other funding sources, the PROTECT program, the Bridge Investment Program. There are no deadlines on those programs yet. We're waiting for those deadlines. We're waiting for those guidelines. And I've already mentioned the suicide deterrent concept, where we stand with those bills. Obviously, the sponsors of those bills, we've spoken with them. We speak with them frequently. The bill as currently written says that we'll have the study done by April 1st of 2022, which of course we will not. So they know that, but we're just waiting on the funding for that study.
Did I read somewhere where you all found a solution for the suicide barriers on the order of $5 million? Where did I read that?
Senator DePalma has come out and mentioned some numbers in.
Where the hell did he get that number?
Because the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, that their solution down there, they use basically it's like a very fine chain link fence.
Yeah.
It's a stainless steel material.
Yeah.
I think the cost of that project was $3.4 million.
Yeah,
But-
it's dangerous for him to be out there creating unrealistic expectations on this.
I've tried to clarify, when people bring that project up and they go there because it was seemingly inexpensive per linear foot, right?
Yeah.
But there's reasons for it. Their bridges, their bridge barrier is Jersey barrier.
Right, it's rigid.
They basically took a piece of unistrut, anchored it to the back of the barrier, and tied a piece of fence to
That's
it.
it.
That, you don't even have to do a wind analysis on that bridge practically the way it's built.
Right.
To know that it's gonna be able to handle
Mhm.
that load. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Suspension bridges.
Our bridges are very different. If I was to say which bridges would be able to take it right away, Secana and Jamestown, probably
Yeah.
with little analysis,
Sure.
you do your due diligence. But when you're talking about Pelham Mount Hope, you've got a whole different animal.
Sure.
And, I shudder when I hear any comparison to Sunshine Skyway. It doesn't mean that you couldn't use a similar type of fencing material. But as I've mentioned to Lori in conversations, the attachments is where all the money comes in on those bridges, if they are able to take
So,
something with
do
legal.
you think it might be helpful, when is the hearing, when are the hearings on this?
One of the hearings was last week
Yeah.
in the Senate, and
How did that?
it passed out of committee and went to the floor. But again, it's for a feasibility study.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what it's all about. So
All right.
these are the questions that will be asked in the feasibility study and hopefully answered.
Exactly, right. And the ARPA funding you mentioned, did your request get forwarded as part of the governor's bundle, as part of his budget proposal, do you know?
It did not.
Okay.
The governor, and we had 3 proposals, and I believe Senator 70 added the Mount Hope Bridge dehumidification project, so we really have 4 pending
Yeah.
for ARPA consideration. I
Yeah.
know the governor has said all of it is on the radar screen, so
Yeah.
but it
You don't know.
did not
It-
get forwarded.
It didn't get forwarded as part of his formal budget
It did not.
submission? Okay. All right.
Just to add to Eric's analysis of the cost involved in anything to do with the aerodynamics of the bridges, even if you just think back, it looks pretty simple now, but the median barrier,
Yeah,
we had to study that when I was
Sure.
here for years.
Yeah.
And we did like analysis, and, you know, just all kinds of analysis, but it ended up being a full scale, not full scale, but a scale model of the bridge in a wind tunnel
Yeah.
before everybody was convinced that that was going to work. Even, and that seems pretty straightforward, you know, just the median. But if you start hanging other things off the side of the bridges and create like a sail, it creates a whole different environment.
Yeah, and I've heard some comments from different folks, you know, about, well, it can't be that big of a deal, they put concrete barrier all over the bridge, why can't they put a fence on the
yeah,
bridge?
no, different.
But then again, I go, oh, it's
Yeah.
not just about
No,
the weight,
it
it's
don't.
not about the weight, that's not so much what I'm worried about, it's everything else, it's the
You know,
wind. I always think back to Tacoma Narrows.
Yeah,
As soon as
you
I
almost
hear
feel
it,
like,
it's
you
it's
almost
I think
feel
about
like
Tacoma
taking
Narrows,
that,
Galloping
taking that
Granny.
out, right? Taking that video out and just occasionally showing it to the public.
Right,
You know, that,
these are the types of things that you don't
this is
worry
the
about,
kind of
it's not
stuff
about
that
the weight.
happens, right?
Yeah,
Right.
it's certainly more complicated than unfortunately folks think on the surface.
Yeah,
you
sure.
know? So,
Great, sounds like we are good today, and I'll take a motion for adjournment. Motion's been made, seconded, unanimously carried. Thank you, everybody.
Great job. Nice job.
How is,